Start. Okay. Sige. Wait lang po ah. Ano naman ang nabala ngayon? Okay. Yeah. So if it's possible, if you could just shift yung view from gallery view to speaker view so that I can just flash my slides. Ito na lang po. Lang na ko kanang gamay. Hello, I'm here. So, ayan. Nagkamas, padako na lang ako. Dali. Kanaan lang. Okay. Sige, para mas... Ay, bang, hindi kita marinig, naka-mute kaya or something.
Okay, naalang may diri father pero mag-off lang pud ko camera
Ah,
nako.
okay ra. Oo.
O basig maano ka wa na kay ka ano diha puro na nagstatwa. Thank you.
Okay, sige lang. Okay. Sige, I'll just proceed with parang if at any point parang na may questions or concerns, you can either just interrupt or maybe chat something there para madali nato nga ma-resolve tong questions that may arise. No? So to start off, so today's session will just be about the content preparation stage, which is really which is composed of several steps, which I will be showing later. I've actually emailed the template to Dean Pat, no? But probably hindi nga niya siguro nakuha. I was hoping that I could share it with you para murag workshop type tong atong agihan. But anyway, we'll see. So, really, parang siguro one of the difficulties that I have personally encountered parang in terms of explaining the courseware development process is to show concretely what it would look like at the end of the process. So doon, when I was working with the SAS chairs, ganun din yung desire nila, no? Parang what would it eventually look like? And that's why, if you can see in your screen, the whole courseware development process is really converting what you have in terms of either the OIDP or the IPP syllabus that you currently have, and converting it into really this one, no? Parang a course. And at the same time, parang each course, as you click this, as you open each of these, as you open the courses, the links to the courses, parang you would see yung basically basic unit ng courseware, which are the modules. So some of these are really not foreign concepts anymore because we've already been teaching for almost a semester. Pero yung implementation niya pagdating sa Moodle or sa Diagler would be a little bit different compared if you were using, for example, Google Classroom. So yun po yung ating gagawin dito. No? How do we make use of this if we already have this one, no? And convert it into actual courseware? Of course, yung the first iteration, yung version 1.0 ng courseware na magawa natin, will not incorporate all the features that would be ideal in a courseware. But at least we will have the basic structure uploaded and used by our students. No? And then over the course of our development, no, parang we can always build on that so that ang version 2.0 can exhibit other advanced features sa courseware which we could activate later, no? And then parang as we go down the line, parang it will become more and more functional, at least for our students, no? So I started off by just taking a look at some of the course providers, no? So you have, for example, if some of you have tried edX or Coursera or FutureLearn or Udemy, or an example of a MOOC or a massive online open course open online course, yung MIT Open Courseware or MIT OCW. So ang tanong ko dito, parang as I tried to reverse engineer parang what they have and what made this platform successful, we could distill this into certain elements. No? Kasi if you log into their system, if you upload their system, if you install their system, I mean, meron silang mga course development tools. Halimbawang edX, they have what you call Studio X, which allows you to basically create courseware, no, on edX. No? So each of that parang merong mga elements din. Ganun din ang Coursera, Future Learn, Udemy. So in other words, meron talaga silang mga ginagamit na mga templates in order to help content providers or subject matter experts to upload their courses online. So let's take a look at what this popular and highly successful online courseware providers have in common. So the first one is that very clear in terms of their courseware, the hierarchy in their courseware. Yung LMS or yung learning management system, a very sophisticated learning management system follows a certain hierarchy. No? So in this case, when arranging a course, parang each of these course providers would really have a very clear hierarchy of sections. No? So there's a section which might be parang the main module, and then subsections could be comprised of subtopics, and then you have units talking about siguro addressing certain learning outcomes, no? In a particular section. No? And all of that parang would have components. Yung components, these are really the activities or the resources that are embedded in the courseware to help the teacher communicate the content to the students. No? So it's also a way in which teachers could evaluate or assess the performance of students in a course. No? So a component could be a video lesson, PDF reading materials. It could also be parang games that you put in. A component could also be a quiz, an assignment portal where you submit work online. It could also be siguro an audio clip, etc., etc. So all of these components, as I said, parang comprise a unit which belongs to a subsection, which belongs to a section. So ito yung isang first common feature of all these major courseware providers, no? And I think it's best to be able to incorporate also that principle so that makita ng mga students clearly ang pagkaayos ng courses, no, na meron siyang that it follows a certain hierarchy so that they will always know at which point in the course they would be, no. So in fact parang sa language ng courseware, yung mga components, unit, subsections, makikita natin yan sa taas para siyang mga menu, and that's what you call a breadcrumb, no? So in Moodle, for example, makikita natin yung breadcrumb because it looks like the path, no? Yung path leading to that particular section. So halimbawa, you're beginning with an introductory topic that could be your main section, and then you can organize it, for example, in terms of subtopics, no? And then parang to break down the subtopics is if it's a very complex matter, then you can have several units composed of these various components in a course. Okay. Next part is that next thing that they have in common is that this courseware would have a certain sequence. No? It's not only the hierarchy. So kanina, yung hierarchy was yung graphic organizer natin, parang ganon. But this one is to reveal that as students progress through the course, they follow a certain sequence. No? So makikita natin to halimbawa sa ating OIDP or sa ating syllabus, no, in terms of how we structure the course so that it follows a certain logical sequence. It could be a sequence in terms of skills that you could build as a ladder leading, for example, to more complicated skills. No? Or in terms of content, you could start with the more rudimentary leading to the more advanced concepts. So again, it very clear that courseware that is successful would have a very reasonable or a logical sequence. The third thing that this courseware would have in common is that each of these courseware has a modular structure. So in case in those sections, parang a section in itself could be considered a module, no? But the subsections could be considered another submodule within a module, no? Now, each of these modules follow a certain structure. And the structure that you would often see when you take a look at courseware like that is, first, it will always contain a learning objective or a learning outcome. So as soon as students open, for example, a particular module, okay, or a particular subsection, klaro nakalagay doon what they're expected to learn at the end of taking this course. I have provided in Moodle, which I will show later, siguro an entire training course, which is really a training course which I took from LinkedIn, no? And then I just took the materials that they have there, and then rebuilt it again in Moodle, no? Just so you would have a feel of what courseware would feel like when it is finally built. So nandoon po nakalagay itong parang all the tips or the things that we need to learn about writing learning objectives or learning outcomes. For our purposes, and I will just clarify it at this point, usually the use of learning objectives and learning outcomes is interchangeable. Um, and much of that is because in the literature, naku-confuse din yung mga, I mean, iba, minsan interchangeable nga ang gamit din ng mga authors. But there are certain sites which emphasize the difference between learning objectives. Yung learning objectives basically is what what a teacher would want to teach, no? Or what a course would want to teach. Ang learning outcome is really learner based. In other words, these are the things that a learner is supposed to do or supposed to acquire at the end of taking a particular course, or in this case at the end of taking a particular module. So that's one very important component in a course. Okay. Good afternoon po sa lahat. Dean Pat, sila Hazel, and then Roy. Good afternoon. No problem. Kanina po sira yung PLDT. We understand. Even sa klase kanina, ayun, parang nahihirapan talaga magpasok yung iba. So,
Thank you, Father.
po, thank you. Nagsugod na lang kami para hindi din sayang yung time. Anyway, I recorded it, so it could be viewed naman parang, but I was just talking for a couple of minutes pa lang. Okay, so to continue po, so the next structure in every module is of course the learning activity. So the learning activity are really the components that you place in a module in order to help a learner learn the objectives or the outcomes for a particular course. So let me just state that for our purposes, to be consistent with what we have been using, ang gagamitin po natin learning outcomes, no? Although doon sa training course na nakalagay sa Moodle, learning objectives ang ginagamit ng trainer, no? But what he actually means is learning outcomes, no? At least in the way that we understand it in the university. Okay. So the learning activities, andun yun, later we will take a look at, again, ano ba tong, what's common to these learning activities that are being put up in an online courseware. And the third major component in terms of the modular structure is the learning assessment. At the end of every module, there is always a part where a student is asked to assess, is being assessed in terms of whether he has learned a particular content. Now, the learning assessment doesn't have to be a separate activity, but it could be incorporated in the content itself. No? Um, I will show you an example later of parang the difference that having a learning objective, parang learning activity, and a learning assessment would make in terms of the design of the course. Okay, so that's for the structure. And also, here are some other characteristics that these major course providers have in common. First is parang there's a lot of interactive content. Now, this might be something that we can look forward to in the future. Probably what we can do right now is the very minimum in terms of interactive content. No? Siguro when we put up a video and when students can rewind, pause, or fast forward the video, that is already an example of interactivity. No? But later on, no, siguro in version 2.0 and beyond of our courseware, we could make use of more interactive tools, no, to be able to engage the students as they work with the content that we have delivered online. So, ayan, parang part yan ng product development phase, no, in terms of the courseware that we're producing. Another characteristic that they have in common is that the content that they put up is always bite-sized, no, and in chunks. Now, sa higher education, I think this is a reality that we need to accept, no? That in online education, the same content that you put up in a face-to-face setting will not be very ideal in an online setup. No? Usually, ang style ng mga courseware is they put it there parang as additional resources for the students. No? So, parang persado ka talaga as a teacher to author your content in such a way that you focus really on essentials. No? Now, parang for example, in the case of courses like nursing where ang aim nito is parang may board exam at the end of it. No? Now, this becomes really difficult. No? Kasi parang some of the content you really need to put up because that might be asked in the board exam. So, ang way to go about it is not exactly to water down the content or to bring the content to essentials, but really to put out the content in smaller chunks. No? So parang ang principle dito lagi, no, one of the ideas in online education is yung the idea of compression. No? Now, according to practitioners, no, yung normal seat time mo when you're teaching a particular course, say for example, you're teaching a course for an hour. In an online setup, when you apply the principle of compression, in an online setup, that 1 hour course must be designed in such a way that an online learner will only have 50% of the seat time that he would normally have in a face-to-face setup. So, ibig sabihin, this is the way of chunking and making online learning bite-size. Now, you might ask, parang, meron tayong 1 hour 30, halimbawa ng mga, no? So, ito po yung, this is really why online education needs, kumbaga, a paradigm shift because right now, we're still operating doon sa mindset na traditional brick and mortar model, no? Wherein class schedules have to be arranged, kailangan may room assignment and so on and so forth. But all of these things are really parang they're not really ideal in an online setup, no? In other words, parang they don't make sense in an online setup. Because in an online setup, yun nga, parang it's really part of the characteristic of this medium is that it is asynchronous. Ibig sabihin, people can access the content anytime, unlike in a traditional setup wherein students would have to class in order to access the content. But this time, they can do that anytime they want. No? So that kind of thinking parang is something that might be difficult for us to move out of at this moment. Kasi sanay nga tayo and we're hoping na we'll get back to that setup. But that kind of setup is not going to be um, is going to ruin our whole online drive, no? Because yun nga, it doesn't really work that way anymore, no? Same with the idea na, halimbawa ngayon pag schedule ng classes, nahirapan mag-schedule kasi dapat may room assignment ka, no? Pero yun nga, parang anong kuha ng room assignment in an online setup, no? Syempre parang it's more difficult to really schedule things, no? But this is one of the challenges of online education, no? When we should be moving out of yon parang a localized synchronous kind of thinking which is associated with face-to-face instruction. No? That I guess in a sense parang already explains the third part of what is written here, no? Yung self-paced, no? But it's not only self-paced. Ito siguro one of the discussions that we had made kasi there was an issue that came up in the senior high school about, and I think it's not just the senior high school, in terms of how students are pacing themselves online. No? Some of them parang hindi na talaga pumapasok ng klase. Some of them parang are just, parang don't know what to do with the matter that is being given to them. So, ang sinasabi natin dito, yung online education setup natin is trying to build an independent learner. No? Hindi pa independent learner ang mga student ngayon. Some have taken it too literally to the extent that I may have mentioned before, binigay lang ang content. Halimbawa, sa isang engineering na subject, binigay lahat ng content at sinabi ng mga students, so pag-aralan nyo yan. No? Yun, presupposing independent na talaga ang learner. But that's not exactly the context that we have right now. No? Our students are not independent learners for the most part. But we're trying to help them become more independent learners. No? So right now, parang I think the more proper understanding of this online setup is that it is self-paced. No? Self-paced in a sense that they could review the content at any time, they could work at it. For example, parang at their own pace. Pero this is, I think, once we built up the courseware, to institutionalize a recommended pace. In other words, this is us setting, kung naplano na kaagad ang courseware at nakalagay na kaagad dyan, kompleto na lahat ng modules dyan, it's easy to put in their dates wherein by this time we should be finished with this, by this time finished with that, etc., etc. No, that's what we mean by the recommended pace. Of course, parang there's always provisions for those who could not keep up with the recommended pace. But the recommended pace is meant to motivate students to parang check themselves also, no? Am I learning the content on time or am I lagging behind or parang am I being too fast in terms of my learning, etc., etc. Now, a simple thing to emphasize itong recommended pace is halimbawa when you're putting up online content, no? If you would notice sa mga ibang course providers, may nakalagay dyan lagi na how much time will it take you to work on a particular content. Halimbawa, if it's a video lesson, usually may nakalagay dyan, halimbawa 15 minutes. Tapos pag may reading, may nakalagay dyan certain number of minutes. In other words, the student or the learner can always anticipate beforehand how much time he needs to devote to a particular subject or to a particular lesson, no? And it's also very helpful for us in terms of determining what would be reasonable content to give in an online setup, no? Kasi nga minsan parang we could be giving too much, no? Not understanding that this is really a very different ball game altogether. Parang Pwede ka magbigay ng marami, but make sure parang at each time that they work with a particular content, it will only take parang a certain time that is to be done online. Much of it could be done offline, pero the actual seat time for working online should always be half of what it would normally take to teach a particular subject. The last thing that these courses have in common is that they make provisions for accessibility. Later on, as we develop our courseware, um, when it is produced more and more according to a certain standard, pwede na yan, yung the videos would have their own transcripts, no? Nakatranscribe yan, so that students who could not watch the video could just read the transcript of the video, no? Another provision for accessibility is making audio files available, no? So all of that parang is part of the product development phase, no, of the courseware that we have. So that yung nga in the future we could look forward to these improvements in terms of the courseware that we're making, no? To make it more and more accessible, not only for those who have fast internet, but also for those who have very weak internet and could only, for example, download text or download audio instead of watching the whole video. Okay. Now, at this point, parang what I'd like to do is just to guide you muna, parang through an exercise, no? Hanapin ko yung aking ano. Okay, if you're online right now, maybe it would be good for us to take a look at an example of what I was trying to say in the past in the past half hour, no? Siguro this is the part where parang it might take the form of parang workshopy type of session. Kasi what I want you to take a look at right now and see for yourself is paano ba ano bang importance ng pag-design ng course, pag-prepare ng content, and how does it actually look like when it is implemented in a courseware, no? So in order to do that, I think if I can just direct you, no, if your browser is open, okay, okay, if your browser is open, if mahina pong internet, maybe you can try it sa cellphone, no. Let's try to access our Diagler, no. So to access that, just type in diagler.adu.edu.ph. So some of us have been using it, so familiar na tayo dyan. Okay, sa akin kasi naka-automatic, no. Pero kung hindi po yun naka-ano, you would have to log in first, no. Sige. Sige, I'll try to wait kasi parang it's best kasi if we could do this parang as an exercise para makita niyo yung connection between what you will do and how it will look like. Sige po, yung mga iba na mahirapan po mag-log in now, you can just view muna what is on the screen. But for those who could access Diagler, no, parang it would be ideal talaga if you can just follow parang what I'm doing. So, sige po. Okay. So if you're online, parang I'd like you to go to site home. Okay. Pagdating sa site home, go to course categories. And then under course categories, just click on online education resources. Okay. And then punta po tayo dito muna sa writing learning outcomes. This course. So, okay. I'm set as student. Now, you might realize that parang that you cannot enroll without an enrollment key. So the enrollment key to enroll in this course is Small caps Magis. Tinype ko po dyan sa chat box natin. No? So what I'll do, I'll just show you muna. Let me activate this. Okay. Okay. Now, if you're taking a look, if you're now inside writing learning outcomes, pwede po, can you give me a thumbs up so just so I'll know parang if there are some of you who are able to follow.
Nawala ko, Father, sorry. Gikan sa site from
sorry. From site
okay
home.
From clicking
Okay.
site home.
Go to course categories. Course categories. And then go to online education resources.
Okay. Thank you, Father.
Okay. And then dito po, writing learning outcomes pa. So, mag-login lang po kayo. In enrollment key is Magis. Small caps. Okay. So, once you're in, I'd like you to click on first dito sa first module na to. No? Kung nakita nyo po, topic 1, tapos ang nakalagay lang dyan video. No? Typically, no, when people understand online teaching, it's just all about uploading the material that you have online. So you can design a course wherein parang you don't even bother changing the title, and then you just put their video and just you leave it as it is. And you leave it up to students to figure out parang what's there, no? So you can do that. Parang that's one way of designing a course. Well, it's not really designing. It's you just putting everything up online. So as you can see, no, dito sa first part muna, no, wala man lang description, at least may nakalagay video. So when students look at it, there's the video there, and notice in the video there's no explanation whatsoever in terms of what it is about, no? And you don't even know parang what it is for, what you're supposed to learn from this video. Parang it's up to you to find out parang what you're supposed to learn. And notice, as I click on it, ayan, andyan yung 1 hour. So, realistically speaking, if you're a student, ang hirap makinig ng video for 1 hour, no? Yung movie nga, parang, you know, parang it has to be a really good movie to capture your attention for an hour. But imagine a lecture, listening for a lecture for an hour. That's going to be very difficult. So, ibig sabihin, kung kunyari itong ginawa ko, nag-lecture lang ako, parang in-upload ko lahat yon, tapos notice 1 hour, problema dito, attention span ng students. Second na problema dito is it will be a very huge video size, no? So in terms of accessibility, magiging mahirap to if you have a very slow connection. Another thing is parang there's no indication what I'll do with it. Parang it's as if you're saying, basta panoorin mo lang yan, whatever is being said there, parang that's the thing that I want to teach. No? So that's what happens when you don't have any plan at all when you're putting up content online. No? Now look at this next module. No? Now, nilagyan ko ng title. So more or less, alam mo that the module is about writing learning outcomes. And notice na even dito sa link, meron ng konting explanation that it's a video lecture on writing learning outcomes, and the entire video will last for 54 minutes, di ba? So now it's becoming more understandable. It's the same content, pero with a little more planning or a little more attention to it, suddenly it's becoming more sensible, no? So if a student clicks on it, ayan, at least alam ko 54 minutes tong video, but still parang I don't really know what this video is all about, no? Unless I view it, no? So again, parang malaki din na naman na size. So in other words, there's much more to be desired in terms of how this could be made better, no? So the third module is us attempting to make this more palatable, no? So right now, nandiyan yung title ng module, and then first part here is, okay, may nakalagay, sorry, hindi ko na ano to. May nakalagay na dito, halimbawa, lecture, learning outcomes, introduction to this course, no? So halimbawa ito, yung sabi natin may proper sequencing, no? So as you can see, even this one is not yet perfect because in as much as may description na siya, parang hindi pa rin siya arranged logically, no? Parang the student gets to attend a lecture, no? Pero hindi niya alam kung anong content, no? Although at this point ilagay ko dito, no? This is us halimbawa planning how we could organize a particular module. So you can write here, dinagdagan ko halimbawa learning outcomes there. And then you have the course content, but still it's 54 minutes. So malaki pa rin, no? Now, if I were to improve this further, parang I could divide this into these two parts, no? So halimbawa, ito po. Now, in this module, all I have are the learning outcomes. So as a student, parang I could program it in such a way na kailangan tingnan mula nila ito in order to mark this activity as complete, no? So once they have viewed it, more or less parang they would have an idea of what they're supposed to learn for this particular module, no? Now, sana yung lesson dito, no? Now, if I click here dito sa next part, notice there's still a description of the video. There's an introduction, information that tells me how long it would take me to watch this video. And notice, for this example, mali yung description, no? Nagkamali ng description ng minutes, pero at least may description na siya of how long it will take. And notice here, if I click it, it's only good for 4 minutes and 17 seconds, no? So also, what I tried to do in order to improve it further is, if you notice here, merong mga, these buttons that show up, no? Now, all these things can be part of how we could develop our content further, no? So this is what I meant earlier when I said na dapat may interactivity, no? So in this case, during this lecture, this thing pops up. So the student can, for example, click on this. So I can add additional details, no? Halimbawa, yan. Ito yung sabi ko kanina, difference between learning objective and a learning outcome. So parang that gives me, parang this makes the content more engaging because, parang I can tinker with the content that is before me, no? So as I move further, let's say for example dito, okay. So notice here, meron na namang isang button, no, which I can click and I can fill this in with details. In other words, all these elements can be used to enhance the interactivity of the content, no? You can use this to bookmark content so that if students want to review this, mas madali na lang for them to review, no? So I use it, halimbawa ganyan, no? Then here's another part here. Okay. Yan. So, in other words, this enhances basically the basic video content that I have, no? So, what if, for example, at this point, sorry, let me just erase myself from the picture muna. Okay. Okay. Now, dun sa latter part po, as you can see, as the video nears its end, okay, notice, meron namang nag-pop up na button, no? So, itong nag-pop up na button parang is a way can be used as a form of a formative assessment, no? So, ibig sabihin yung formative assessment doesn't really have to be very complicated na magpa-quiz ka, no? But the formative assessment can be as simple as this, no? A way of checking whether a student understood the content here. Let's say, at the end of this video, there's already this formative assessment, no? Halimbawa, I could ask, ano ba, what is this video all about, no? So what if, halimbawa, mali ako, I did not really understand it. So I click here. So immediately, I'm given feedback na mali yung pag-intindi ko ng video, no? So I can try again, for example, mali pa rin. And what if, okay, now it's the correct answer, no? I have two wrong answers, okay? Now I know the correct answer. So, yan. I continue. And then at the end of this course, notice, parang there's a part here where the formative assessment that I have answered within the video could be submitted so that, parang the teacher could check also parang a student's progress. Pero hindi mo na kailangan mag-check. Mag-check talaga. It's just you to verify because the feedback has already been given to the student immediately. So the student can decide to submit the answer and then it will show up, for example, in your own panel, no? So, yun yung example natin of interactivity, no? So, going back, I will hide all this kwan muna. Hide. Okay. Now, look here. As you can see, I rebuilt the content so that parang you will have an idea of what courseware would feel like, no? At least in our case, no? So halimbawa, when I rebuilt it using the content that is actually available sa link, and then I just place it there and rebuilt it from scratch, no? Kasi sa LinkedIn, parang it's just a series of videos. This time, I've converted it into a courseware that we can actually use for training in terms of learning outcomes, no? So the first module, for example, you have there, okay? Basically, there's information that tells me what is inside the module. And then there are the activities here which I can click. So for example, at the start, I click on, if you click on course introduction, okay, notice that this is an example of how I built, sorry, dito na lang ako. Okay, this is me building up the content, no? So this is an example of a module that parang it's a self-contained module in itself, no? Containing fair use statement and then learning outcomes for the course. So if I click on it, no? Yung kanina parang ano pa lang yun, sample pa lang yun. But this time, this is us implementing it parang in the form really of a courseware, no? So the student is able to check what the learning outcomes are, no? And then as he clicks further, then nandyan yung introduction video. So if you're in here, try clicking on it. You will see nandun ulit yung elements kanina, no? Okay. Okay. So it's here, no? So if I'm finished, then all I have is click summary and then submit. So here, as a student, I'd be able to understand halimbawa how I have performed in this course. Now, this isn't feasible unless you really have designed and prepared the content beforehand. That's why importante po yung content preparation because everything that you do, no, if it's there, if it's complete, it can easily be converted into something like this, no? So the more detailed your plan is, the more opportunities for you to turn your course into something more very interactive for students, no? So once I'm done with that, I can move, for example, to the next module. And here, yan, nakagamit na yung mga completion. No? Ibig sabihin, I cannot access this unless I have finished the other modules. So in this case, ano bang kulang ko dito? I haven't introduced myself to class. No? So yan, pwede ako mag-post dyan. Once I have posted, then it will activate all the succeeding modules until I come to the end of the course. No? Notice that in this course, ganun din, it makes use of the same principles. No? I have here, Hindi ko bukas because I've been completed. So, ayan, the learning outcomes for this module, for this section. And then there is the lesson there. And this lesson makes use of another interactive button, no? Yung bookmark, no? So I could actually bookmark my videos so that students, if they review, they can easily scroll to the bookmarks, no? So nandyan din, halimbawa, things like this, the same thing, button. And also, at the end of this course, so lalabas na naman po yung summary button at the end of it, no? So this is where I can put in, for example, parang another formative assessment about that lesson, no? So this time, halimbawa, naintindihan ko ng mabuti what the lesson was about, and I am able to pick the correct answer. So immediately, I have feedback, and then I know that I did well, no, as a student. So click it, and then I can submit my answer to my professor. And then that means I can move now to the next module, no? So in this module, halimbawa, I've put in the exercise files that was mentioned in the video lesson. So here's another module where I can actually answer the questions here, no? I can type in, for example, I can use this, no, to type in my answers, no? Halimbawa, okay, type in sample. Okay. So I can make samples here, or I can even download the material so that I can work on it offline. Okay. So once I finish this activity, so this will allow me to check whether I have accomplished the learning objective for that module. And then sa latter part, you'd have a forum where if there are questions or things that you'd like students to discuss, they can discuss it here in this discussion forum. So ganun, for the rest of this course, it follows that structure and it is sequenced in such a way that the learning is really parang ladderized, no? And then at the end of it, there's an opportunity for me to assess my learning, to reflect on my own learning, no? What are my main takeaways from the course, and also an opportunity for me to rate how this, to evaluate the entire course itself, no? So again, it's a form of self-evaluation. Now, all of these things is really parang guided by the design of the course, no? And that's why very crucial in terms of what we're doing, content preparation, is really yung instructional design na sinasabi natin, no? And really, the main instructional design model that we're using is the Ignatian Pedagogical Paradigm, the IPP, no? If you look at, for example, what we have done before, okay, let me just show you the sheet that we have. So halimbawa, kahit na whether OIDP yung tingnan mo or yung iyong syllabus, no? This course learning plan that you have in the syllabus, okay, if this is to be converted into an actual online course, you can pick up the elements of this IPP syllabus and you can use it to create really parang it's an align kumbaga your topics, learning outcomes, assessments, and activities, no? So that everything kumbaga is very structured. Now, the thing about Courseware is that what we are really doing is creating a very structured learning environment, no? So if we are to take a look, for example, at it from the lens of the IPP, this is the part where the design part of that learning experience falls under the experience of the IPP, no? So remember, context, experience, reflection, action, and evaluation, no? The whole designing of the course really takes into account these principles so that parang as we design the course, it will always exhibit an understanding of the context of the learner, designing the experience so that the learner is able to learn something from what we have prepared, putting in provisions for the learner to reflect on that experience, and making sure that the activities provide some kind of application for the students of the content that they have learned. And also in terms of the online course, the evaluation part is the learner evaluating his own learning experience. um, so in other words, um, yung what we were saying in terms of instructional design, and this is, I think, the real concern, no? In 2017, I don't know, parang I don't think the School of Nursing was there, but or I don't know, I just remembered yung mga the SAS chairs were there. I gave a seminar in preparation to help administrators in terms of preparing yung IPP syllabus. So sila Doc Gina at that time, our dean, our AVP, asked us, ako, Father Tony, and Father J-Boy, to talk about how the IPP could be transformed into a syllabus, no? So just to go back again, no, parang the more I reflect on this experience, the more that I realize that parang in terms of instructional design model, parang there's no need to look at any, I mean, all the other instructional models uh, are just tools that we're using, no? But the main model that we're using in terms of designing the course is still the IPP, because this is still a Jesuit university, no? And as a Jesuit university, this is the kind of educational experience that we would like to provide our students, no? So going back again, no, the principles of IPP, no, all of this can be seen in the content preparation phase, no. First, in terms of the context, parang I think I will just upload this so that you can take a look at this again, no. But in terms of the context, what we're actually doing, no, here is to really understand where our learners are coming from so that we could teach them well, even in an online setup, no? So that is why the first phase of the content preparation, first steps, I guess, is really us asking the question of parang what do our learners need? What do they want? What do they need to do? Parang how are they in terms of their readiness for online learning, etc., etc., no? All of these things, the details of this, how to carry out this context part, is in one of the modules that I have prepared, which I will show later. But just to show you ito, again, a very important process in terms of our design of our courseware. The second process is, of course, the experience, no? And here, if you look at it, the question when it comes to experience is really something that informs the whole design process. So whether we're thinking about the learning outcomes, the assessments that will be aligned with the learning outcomes, and the material that we will use in order to be able to help students attain those outcomes, is part of the experience that we're really designing, no? But this is a really structured experience, no? And that's why parang part, as I said, the authoring of the courseware is very important at this phase, because this is really going to be the heart of the courseware. The next part here, the reflection phase, no? I'll just show you, is the point where in the course design, we would have a time where students could look back at what they have learned, no? So either this could come in the form of a formative assessment to be able to help students, a formative question to be able to help students reflect on what they have learned, no? So, but it can be embedded in the whole courseware that we're designing. In fact, if you take a look at edX courses, no, after they put up content, there's always a part there na ang sinasabi lang nung module na yon, take time to review the things that you have learned for this particular module and look at whether you have really answered the questions at the beginning of this module. So that is an example of the reflection part that should be part of the design for the course. So, okay, we go to the part. The action part is really where the design moves to an application. No? So I think in a course like nursing, parang this is something that is uh, parang very applicable precisely because parang at the end of it, parang the knowledge that you learn has to be translated really into action, no? Uh, and so parang our course design has to also take into account this. So this part. So if you take a look even at the syllabus that you've made, no? Kung meron ka na nun, no? Um, that already incorporates, I guess, the action part. Nandun na yun doon sa format ng IPP syllabus before, no? Which you can organize also parang as a tool using yung OIDP, no? Parang it's a way of structuring that as well. Now, the last part is evaluation, no? And the evaluation is where at some point in the courseware, no? It could be at the end of every module. It's where we are able to assess how well our students are learning. So this evaluation does not only mean parang an assessment of whether they've met the learning outcomes for the course, but it's also really an assessment of whether parang whether our students have actually of our students' entire learning experience. No? So this could be inserted as well in the courseware that we're developing. No? So all of these things, as I mentioned, parang are really present in the way we craft our courseware. No? So in terms of principles guiding the design of this courseware, you would see that our Ignatian pedagogical principles in terms of courseware design are still very applicable even in an online setup. The first thing is tantum quantum, which means, as translated, in as much as it helps, meaning that the design of the course should take into account, at least at this point, things which are really essential in order to help students learn, no? That we put in content as much as they help students. So notice the direction here really is in terms of how can we help students learn better? And therefore, assessments, content, even the objectives that we plan are always geared in as much as is towards the student, in as much as it helps the students. Okay. The next part is, of course, cura personalis. Now, this is where instructor presence and feedback would come in. No? This is where, parang as part of the courseware, there are provisions for students to be able to communicate with their teachers. No? Part of that, kung nakita nyo doon sa discussion forum, this is actually a way of parang incorporating this principle as well in the design of our course. So in other words, parang I think part of the mindset in terms of this designing for courseware is that, you know, parang we are always coming from the perspective, not just in terms of the content that we'd like to deliver, but really our starting point is our students. Saan na ba sila ngayon? And how do we want to teach them, no? How could we accompany them so that they can move from where they are at this point to where we would like to take them? So this is the underlying principle behind that. No? And third part, no? Kanina we were talking about chunking and bite-sized modules or information. No? This Latin phrase, non multa sed multum, which means not many but much, emphasizes the importance of deepening. No? While there are some courses na ang kwan mo talaga is broadening your knowledge about the subject, part of the characteristic of Jesuit education is not so much breadth, although that is important, but depth. How could we deepen it so that even with the content that we have, students are able to really learn it well? And I think in online education, it lends itself to that. Because as we focus on essential competencies or even essential topics, no, there is an opportunity to deepen what students can learn about a particular competency or a particular, even a particular topic. Okay? So all of this parang are really design principles that underlie how courseware development is to proceed. Okay. Okay. The last part. Um, okay. Um, I have shared with Dean Pat a Google Sheet. Okay. Now, dito sa Google Sheet po, um, Dean Pat, I don't know if you've received it. Parang I sent an email about just sharing this particular file. This is just a tool to help us parang structure the whole process. You might have already decided about the courses that you'd like to convert, no, as part of the courseware development project, no. So this is really a sheet, a toolkit to be able to help us structure, especially for those of us who are managing the entire process, no. So you have here course code, course description, and then filling up the roles so that we could hold, there's a sense of accountability in terms of people who will be attending to the courseware development project. The next tab that you have here is really parang an elaboration of the content preparation step. No? So notice this is just kumbaga a tool to help us, especially those of us who are organizing and managing and leading people to it, no? Para alam lang natin parang saang step na ba tayo dito, no? So notice the first step, as I've explained before dun sa first session natin, is really to gather all the materials that we have, no? Quizzes, tests, OIDP, syllabus, things that you've written for that particular course, no? All the handouts or even the textbooks that you have, no? So the next part is to take a look at the context of the students. Now, in order to do this, meron po akong nilagay doon sa Moodle course na under din doon sa online education resources. There's a part there on instructional design. But doon sa part ng, let me just show it para hindi po tayo ma-confuse. Dito po sa Instructional Design Foundations and Applications, you can enroll in this course using the enrollment key Magis as well. Dito sa Module 3 and 4, you will find here parang input in terms of how you could do this part of needs analysis or learner environment, learner context analysis. So basically, these steps, while they might sound technical, ang purpose lang nito is so that it's very clear to us that when we're designing, we're always taking into account the context of our students. One way to also do that, because I think what is different here is that in conducting this analysis part or this looking into the context part, okay, at least from the IPP's perspective, is looking at the readiness of students in relation to online education. So in this same toolkit, there's a third tab that I've included there. It's called a student readiness rubric for online education. No? So halimbawa, we can gather as a faculty and try to assess siguro our students in terms of whether they're not ready or ready for this kind of education, no? So that we could design accordingly. No? Each of these focuses on certain parts, technology skills, work habits, etc., etc. Parang it's just a way of situating ourselves, no? Situating where our students are in relation to online education. So hindi lang parang feedback na hindi mo klaro saan ba to talaga, are they ready or are they not ready, but it would help us, parang get a more objective sense of where they are in relation to online learning. So ano lang siya, again, it's just a tool that you can use, especially as you conduct a needs analysis, no, or looking at the context of the students. The next step I have mentioned is in terms of discussing the course topics and learning outcomes. No? You can take a look at the OIDP that you have if it's there, or the syllabus. Maybe at this point, it's a matter of reviewing it again, no? And seeing ano ba talaga yung kailangan natin ilagay dito. Which topics help us in terms of attaining a certain competency. Again, this is a way of aligning parang topics with competencies that we want to teach. No? And basically, these steps here is just a way for us to discuss and finalize and write down or rewrite the learning outcomes for the course. Once that is done, then we could basically create the first draft of our course design blueprint, which contains something similar to this, no? Where you have kanina, parang ano yung topics, subtopics, and then student learning outcomes, and then what assessments to give, student learning outcomes, I mean, no? So yung palang na part na to, no? And then we could then guide our colleagues in terms of discussing, no, what assessments would be appropriate so that we could meet the learning outcomes for that particular module or for that particular section, no? And then part of this phase is really developing it. In other words, writing it down, digitizing it so that it could be ready for uploading doon sa courseware itself. No? Once that is done, ibig sabihin, now the course design blueprint begins to look more meaty. No? Kasi hindi lang learning outcomes nandoon, pero ngayon, klaro na rin kaagad what the assessments will be. No? Once that is done, that is the only time when we determine what are the activities or the materials that we put in to help students perform well in terms of the assessments that we're providing them, so that it can meet the objective, the outcomes that we would want for the course. No? Again, it's a matter of collating all those materials, putting them, parang making sure that they are already in a digital format, so that once it is transferred to the course technicians, they can easily upload it and build the course for you. No? So, once that is done, ibig sabihin, mas nakumpleto na yung plan mo, yung design blueprint mo, and then once that is done, you submit the course design blueprint, no? So the instructional designers can take a look at it again, and once it is vetted by the instructional designers, no? Or if they have been working through the process, so wala nang, ibig sabihin, parang there's no need to have it pass through an instructional designer anymore kasi nagtrabaho na along the way, then we can pass it now to the course technicians who will use the design that you have built, all the content and the materials that you have prepared, and they will be the ones to prepare the courseware for you. And all you have to do is just to wait until they've completed finishing it. They completed it. And then once it's completed, then you will test it. Then you will be taught how to configure and, you know, parang customize it further for your use. No? And once it passes through that testing, prototyping phase, then that's the time we deploy the courseware for our students. So this is the sheet, no? Ang nakalagay dito, if you look at the columns, it just tells you, halimbawa, status, if you've completed it or not. So this could be useful, especially for coordinators, no? Or for the other administrators, para meron ka lang way of checking parang how everyone or how the courseware development process is going on. So one column there is asking the question, what do we have so far? So basically, it's you assessing yourself vis-a-vis that particular step. No? And what else do we need to do? So it's really just to help us plan in terms of ano ba kailangan natin so that we could accomplish this step. And then this column, who will be the persons responsible? Again, para meron tayong sense of accountability. We know who to look for or we know who to ask for in terms of this particular step. And then here's a part where we could schedule dates so that we could, prepare a timeline in terms of how we could achieve our goals. And then here's a part where we can identify what we need. Do we need training in this? Do we need parang more, depende, whatever support that you need there, you could put in there. And then because we want this to be really a learning experience, there's that part wherein as soon as we finish a particular process, no, to help reflect on the process again. So as you can see, parang IPP pa rin yung ginagamit natin. No? Parang it's just a mindset that we're trying to build up because eventually this courseware development, the improvement of the different iterations will hopefully in the future will something that will be an initiative of the schools themselves. Kaya nga parang what I'm trying to do is to teach parang how we could do it so that later on parang schools would be more equipped to initiate and conduct the process themselves without having to rely pa on another office. Pero in other words, it's us trying to give you parang that agency to be able to carry out that development yourself. So these two columns is basically a point where we evaluate parang how we've conducted the process so that it can be a learning process for us. And then the last part is a part what we can accomplish just to say, okay, we've completed this step way ahead of our projected due date. So ibig sabihin, maybe this is really an easy step or maybe this was a difficult step and so on and so forth. So this is the content preparation toolkit. Parang I just introduced you to it. It's just a tool, no, which if you find it useful, you can use it to be able to help manage the process. No? The last one that I will show, parang it's just me showing these tools, is that at the end of it, you might ask, so how will we know if we're doing a good job in terms of courseware development? No? This one is an online course standards checklist. Basically, in terms of quality assurance, you have here certain criteria in terms of what we expect from the courseware that you're building. Of course, at the start, parang alam natin, we won't be able to tick off everything. But at least we would know in terms of development, parang what else we could improve on so that it meets the standards. No? Yung basis po nito is yung National Standards for Quality Online Courses, no? Which is the standard that they use in the US, no? Yung Quality Matters na standard, no? Which is the thing that they use in terms of evaluating online courseware. So we're adapting that and just making a few revisions in terms of what we expect as an Ateneo de Davao University courseware. But all the rest are really patterned after the national NSQ standards. No? So as you can see in this sheet, no, parang this will be dun sa latter part ng phase na to. Meron dyan point where the course developer himself or herself could evaluate whether did you meet the expectations of this. The instructional designer is also given an opportunity to evaluate. The project manager, okay, the dean, and then eventually from the Office of Online Education, parang in the AVP office, parang that's the time we could evaluate as well. At least parang we're all on the same page in terms of expectations that we have for the course. Okay. So, in other words, those are the tools that I have shared so that we could start that process. No? And as I said, in Moodle, okay, if you just go to online education resources, there are already 3 available courses there that you can take. Si Roy as our instructional designer for the school, parang perhaps you'd like to take a look at this course, no? Instructional Design Foundations and Applications, because this part, the analysis part, would really be useful in terms of helping course developers in terms of doing the context analysis part. And then all the others parang are just information to help us review again how we can write effective learning assessments, and how we could write learning outcomes, no? Because these are all part of what we will be doing in terms of the courseware design phase, no? So the preparation for the content will basically focus on what learning outcomes, okay? Ibig sabihin, parang we've determined as well parang what the topics will be or the subtopics will be, and then writing the assessments, and then looking at what content we would like to put up to help the students learn online. So basically, all these things are all part of what we need to do parang from the faculty's side, no? Um, and the rest, yung the building, the more technical aspect of it, we will leave to the course technicians. So I'll stop with that, and maybe if you have questions, I, I guess I can entertain questions at this point.
Father, good afternoon.
Yes, Velma, good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon, Father. I have some points that I would like to clarify. A while ago, you said that we will integrate, we will align OIDP with IPP, you said,
No,
with
we
the
will not
content.
align. We will not align OIDP with IPP. We will align parang assessments. We will align content, assessments, and learning outcomes. Parang that's the alignment that we will make.
Because we have really, I believe the more important thing that we need to do is to migrate first from the traditional that we did before we get into the alignment process. And number two, you made mention that that's my idea because I have used the OIDP and it doesn't fit IPP, diba? Hindi sila pareho eh. Tapos,
Um,
you, yeah, you said a while ago that IPP would be enough. Well, IPP is a good model, but giving the idea that we will measure it universally, why don't we also make use of the other models, since we have to make use also of the TPAC rule or the model or the framework, the technological, the content, as well as the pedagogical. Pedagogical, naglibog pa gani ang mga teacher kung saan paggamit ang IPP, Father. Na dili man gud pare-parehang pagtudlo, dili pare-parehang delivery, and I'm sure in the nursing na lang, which I have observed, dili man tanan kasabot kung saan na siya. Now, we will make use of that. But based on my experience, I make use of IPP at the same time knowing the process. But I also needed the models because there are models that are needed by nursing instruction. We are collaborative in a sense because a lot of our evaluative sessions are for students to demonstrate. So do we really need to go to Courseware? Or can we just have another one? Because in the undergrad kasi, Father, may redemonstration kasi yan eh, of the knowledge. That's why we find it, siguro sa mathematics, sa engineering, mas madali ang courseware because they will just have to compute, they will just have to print it out there. In the nursing kasi, Father, even if it is lecture, there are some skills that we need to undergo. Maybe kung content lang, okay lang. Okay lang. And number three, the way we do it now, it's a walkthrough. We are not really taught how to do the content. We are only seeing the headings, what are the content, but we are not taught how to do it. And then mag-train pa si Roy. I don't know. And then we are expected to do it in a hurry. Mag-prepare pa mi sa mong second semester, Father. Saan man eh?
Okay.
Where are we now?
Okay.
Kadto lang sa, Father, kay ako naano lang jud ko sa katong balancing nato because I believe we also have to get in touch with i-primary sa siguro mi adtong mga model sa online learning, tapos i-review nato ang IPP because there are certain things. That's why in my experience man gud to nagsugod ko, nagamit jud kog model kay didto ko natabangan, didto ko nakakita, no? Not only ADI because ADI it's another one. So mo na siya, Father, akong point.
Okay. Thank you, Melba, for sharing your thoughts on this. No? So first,
Welcome.
in terms
Thank you,
of
Father.
okay, yeah, I think yung nga parang one of the major difficulties, instructional challenges for nursing is really parang di ba the demonstration part that you're doing, the hands-on instruction that is required, no? But given this context, parang I think we have to take a look at working online nursing programs that have made use of certain ways of um, parang basically teaching what is needed to be taught in nursing without necessarily parang having to parang resort to what would be done in a normal face-to-face setup. Take for example, I have shared with Dean Pat some literature, no? Halimbawa in terms of developing virtual patients, virtual communities, no? In fact, parang this need for demonstration and parang simulation for certain skills could be done, and that could be part of the courseware development that could be done, no? I will show you an example um, of how this thing really plays out, no? Where is that? Um, so for example, you have, right, uh, okay. Okay. Now let's try to imagine, for example, you want to simulate parang a point where a student is to parang simulate a hospital visit or I don't know, parang a visit with the patient, no? We could develop something like this. Let me just share this with you. Okay.
Father
Okay.
OG.
Yeah, yes, Pat.
Regarding what Melba is pointing out,
Mm,
actually, we already have translated it into terms that can be used for nursing, just like the alternative approaches that we have been using right now during the first semester.
mhm,
But of course, with regard to the hands-on experience, we really cannot be able to meet the requirements for that because we really have to bring the students to the hospital for affiliation. But just this morning, I was able to forward an article about the use of standardized patients, which can also be done as one of the strategies for alternative approaches, approximating already what will be the real setting in the hospital. So in other words, there are so many alternative approaches that have been introduced to nursing. Many of them have already been used by our own clinical instructors in the related learning experience. And that is how we were able to, cross the bridge, especially in coming up with the bridge that will that will put that will somehow address the gap between RLE and also our outcomes and objectives for the nursing program, so that they have already made use of so many teaching methodologies, Father. And I think yung sinasabi din ni Melba is another thing, especially if we are to really focus on the hands-on experience. But definitely, all of the things that we do in the related learning experience has already been transformed into alternative learning approaches that have been considered acceptable on the part of the RLE part in nursing and other health sciences. In that case, Father, that is already understood to be in practice
Okay.
in the nursing education.
Okay.
All over the Philippines na po, Father, because that those were approaches already introduced by CHED, and the ADPCN has recommended it for it to be used in the different nursing programs in the Philippines.
But they're using models, Father, the online learning models. That's why they have patterns. And one example is in the States, they're using this. They're using simulated robots or mannequins. But according to our students, a lot of them are not allowed to touch the patient. Kaya mas gusto nila ang mga Pinoy kasi sa estudyante pa lang, hasana. So ang point ko lang, why should we, if we are going back to the hospital, and we know very well because ang Elsevier nga, it was rendered not really helpful for us since kailangan natin ng manikin eh. So, eto ngayon, titingnan natin, if we are going to focus so much on the coursework, at this time, Father, that we are also supposed to focus on our second semester work. Para saan ba to? Sa amin ba to? Sa undergrad o para sa graduate school? Because that's why I wanted to learn how to do instructional design. Because all of us should be trained. Kasi kami ang gagawa ng content eh. Mag-guide lang naman si Roy in the long run eh. Because I'm pretty sure he will not do it for us. All of us. There are so many. So in other words, i-guide lang niya kami. Kami pa rin ang gagawa. That's how I picture the future. I'm a teacher, Father. I understand how this goes. Because the way I see it, kung si Roy ay iti-train, surely hindi naman niya gagawin yung trabaho namin. He will guide us. But how about us being trained? Para hindi na namin kailangan hintayin pa kung kailan kami mabibigyan ng panahon. Because when we make our own content, we should already have in mind the design. Kasi di ba dapat meron ng ganon? Nandun na yung design. Kaya nga sinabi mo, Father, kanina, yung syllabus natin, i-align natin sa OIDP, which is I find funny. Because we're already online.
Wait.
No.
I think you misunderstood. You weren't listening carefully to what I was saying, Melba.
Okay, kindly enlighten me, Father, because that was how I took it.
Okay, I did not say that it should be aligned with the OIDP. I said that the contents in terms of what the syllabus or IDP should contain should be aligned, because this is what the structure that should inform, for example, how online education module should look like. No? So in other words, parang it's a tightly packed, it's a cohesive structure that allows the student to be able to assess even for himself parang whether he is actually learning something. Okay, so that's why those modules have to be designed in that way. No? Now, I mentioned that whether it's the OIDP or whether it's the IPP syllabus that you have, there are certain structures there which incorporate this whole idea of aligning everything so that it makes for a very structured and cohesive learning experience for students. Okay, so that is what I said, not what you said. Okay, is that clear?
Parang yung pa rin yun, Father. Aligning no. I want to ask, when you say aligning, sige ba, paki-breakdown daw, Father, para ma-clear sa akin.
Okay. I think parang I will just give a copy of what I had said. Okay,
yes, Father.
So that you can
thank you
again. Okay, so that's why it's being recorded.
Father Oji.
Yes.
If I may add po, with regard to simulation, actually, we can only name at least siguro 2 or 3 schools in the whole Philippines who have mannequins for their laboratories. But majority do not have the mannequins, no? What do you call this? High fidelity mannequins. And they have actually considered the use of standardized patients instead of using mannequins in
Nawala kasi ng
simulations, Father.
Yan.
Kaya hindi naman kailangan talaga ng mannequins kasi ilang schools yan, 300 plus. Ilan lang ang merong high fidelity mannequins kasi hindi nga ma-afford ng mga schools. So yun yung inaano nila ngayon, that we have to learn more about the use of standardized patients in simulating our classes para sa related learning experience. But that is a work in progress, Father, kasi ngayon pa lang yan medyo gina-introduce dito sa Philippines kasi that has been the practice in the United States, but still unknown to all Philippine schools of nursing. But anyway, we are going to learn more about it and we will be more familiar with it in in a few months' time. I guess that will be introduced to all schools.
Okay.
That is
Yeah,
good news.
I think the whole point really is what can we do now, di ba? Parang what do we have? What can we identify as something that is doable now? And all the others that might be a little more challenging to plan for, then we could do that later. That's why we're prioritizing muna. We're not here to solve everything yet, no? Um, if someone can do it, first give me something that works, no? If you don't give me something that works, then parang that doesn't count, no? But right now, parang we have something, and we'd like to implement at least with, especially with the courses that could work right now, no? And we can find ourselves moving towards that direction wherein we can make use of what technologies that are available to us right now to implement some of the things, some of the instructional strategies that many of you are already practicing at this point, to make it even more palatable, even if it is being deployed online. No? Such as, for example, this thing which I'm showing on screen. No, um, it's as you can see here, parang it's a simulation, a simulation visit, no? And as for example, when students will do it, parang all it takes to be able to plan for it is for you to determine beforehand parang the um, scenarios that will be played out, parang, and then the branching in terms of the scenarios depending on the choices that students will make. This is actually doable already through a technology that is embedded already in our LMS. So in terms of this, parang something like this, no, could be done, no? So therefore, parang it's really a matter of identifying at this point, really, which courses should we be prioritizing first because they are doable, no? And then we build from that, no? We start from that. All the others, parang it's very difficult really to come up with a one size fits all solution for everyone. But at the very least, parang we could abide by certain principles in terms of how it should be designed, no? But in terms of what we'd like to focus on, as Dimpat mentioned before, parang, that you have identified at least 3 courses that you would be you would subject to a courseware development process. So let's work with that, and see parang how it turns out, and if it turns out well, and if it allows us to be able to create a more adaptable learning environment online, then maybe we could start tackling all the other courses. So in other words, let's not make difficulties be a hindrance in terms of doing something, because otherwise parang we won't be able to come up with anything at all, no? um, but let's start with what's doable, let's start with what's feasible, let's start with what's easy to do, at least at this point, given the courses that you currently have, and that could be our stepping point in terms of improving.
We do similarly with what you are showing to us, Father. In fact, we do it. We give
Mm.
scenarios. We ask them to do it. We, in fact, ask them to redemo it. My point is, I just would like to know more about the strategies, because we have to go back there. We have to know more because this is online platform. And
Mm-hmm.
when we deliver it, we need to enhance our teaching because we made use of the face-to-face before, and our strategy is face-to-face.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to
Mm-hmm.
somehow change it to be able to
Right.
meet the needs of the student outside. So yun lang
Mm.
talaga hinihingi ko, Father. Yung
Sige,
before tayo mag-embark, sana mas may maintindihan pa kami kasi in the end kami pa rin ang gagawa ng courseware.
sige.
Yun lang yung
So
point ko.
we'll Melbs, we'll try to provide itong mga these online courses that we could take so that we could pick up some ideas from it, no? Kasi very diverse nga yung very diverse yung needs needs, di ba? Halimbawa, this one is
We can
created using H5P, no? We're hopefully yung next phase ng training for courseware technicians would be using this. Now, why aren't we offering this for faculty yet? Kasi nga, yung burden ng faculty at this point is really parang still creating the content, no? And that's why we're at least parang as a programmatic intervention, we're still trying to plan it out, parang to prioritize this. And parang siguro that's the limitation that we have at this point. We can't really address each specific course, no? All the courses at the same time, because that's very difficult to do at this point, no? Right now, parang I'm basically, I don't have any staff. I'm doing all of this individually. I'm meeting all the schools and parang addressing questions and issues like this, no? So yun, parang I think to make it more doable, no, let's start muna with people who can collaborate on certain courses. We'll be providing all the other trainings siguro as we go along. Surely, parang if you want to take a look at some of it, parang there's already that, no, on Moodle. They're not really original content. They're basically paid content, which we cannot provide for everyone. That's why I had to rebuild it na lang on Moodle. But it's the same topics being taught by experts, parang in other parang experts, no. So yeah, I hear you. I recognize what you're saying in terms of parang what else
Thank
can we
you.
provide teachers in terms of training so that we could teach better, no. I'm sorry, parang we cannot really parang address parang really specific concerns like right now, such as, you know, parang in my particular course, parang what can I do in order to teach it well, no. Right now, parang
Father,
we're focusing muna on we're prioritizing certain courses muna at this point.
can we invite the consultant from CHED? Because I saw them in webinar for the nursing program. They have really guided some schools well in terms of the delivery, in terms of the models, in terms of the strategies. Yun yung nakita ko dun sa ADTPCN ng seminar, webinar, dun sa iba pang webinar ng ibang branches ng CHED. That's why, because they are focused on nursing, so perhaps we can also get from there. Here, maganda na to na binigyan nyo kami ng idea. I really appreciate your effort na to really give us this, because I understand that you know our needs. But at the same time, we also understand our needs. We are from the ground. We are rooted from that very basic need of understanding the whole process, and how do we enhance our teaching? Because from here, we know very well that our strategy is still face-to-face, trying to make up for the lack. So trying to substitute it with something. But when I know very well that there are other strategies that we can use, hindi naman kailangan nandyan lahat, di ba, Father? Tama naman yun eh. Hindi naman kailangan nandyan yung tao. Kasi sa nursing kasi, Father, iba talaga pag may mannequin. Kasi meron tayong application. But it is not always possible. But at least we can do the strategy well. Kasi dun tayo babawi. Yung bang interactive, Father, ba? Kasi sa face-to-face, alam mo naman, di masyado interactive, di ba? Pero mas mapaganda pa natin yung ating delivery.
Yeah, I think parang as we go along, that could be something that could be discussed. So parang it's I mean it makes sense to be able to do that, no? But given some of the limitations which Dean Pat mentioned earlier, certainly parang there are certain things right now that I mean we cannot afford. That's one. Secondly, certain things siguro parang given the many concerns that we would have to address, parang we certainly need to prioritize certain things at this point. So, but still, parang I guess parang that could be something that could be discussed if for example you gain, for example, the consensus of people, why not, diba? Parang if it's something that's going to help others as well, no? So yun lang naman, parang ang tingin dito parang I think what I'd like to emphasize here is that what can we do so that we could help others, no? At least at this point, no? Whether that would be in terms of proposing certain ways of doing things, no? That's why binababa natin to at the level of school so that we could really take a look at what schools could do, parang using their own understanding of what's happening in the ground in terms of how these things could be implemented. I think we just need to have, parang everyone's support, to be able to carry out certain things, no? So that's one thing, no? And I guess parang if an idea really does make sense and is sound, then parang surely we wouldn't have any problems in terms of finding support for it, no? Yun lang siguro yung I think something that we have to where we are at this point and where we'd like to go, no? Yeah. So any other concerns in terms of I mean how to do it? Maybe from the
Good
coordinators
afternoon,
or
Father.
hi, good afternoon po. Who's
Good
speaking?
afternoon,
Sorry.
Father. I'm Grace.
Hello, Grace. Hello.
Grace po.
Hello, Grace.
Actually, I have a concern lang, Father, because
Mm,
I was not around during the meeting last week kasi wala akong internet.
mm,
So to do this courseware development because my concern is first when I asked for what subject, the subject
mm,
given to us was on the first sem. And another is if we are going to work on the first sem subject, so it means to say that our subject on the second sem will be left. Hindi ko alam kung saan po ang i-focus sa first sem ba? Balikan ba ulit yung first sem or sa second sem? Because I also have to also acknowledge other new faculties like mga part-time father that
mm,
hindi pa sila kasi yung of the trainings or seminar that which we also
mm,
have it last time.
mm,
So pati yung paggawa ng syllabus, kami pa kasi noon, wala pa kasi yung part-time. So that's also their concern kasi even the learning outcome, Father, how to formulate it, it's really difficult for them. So kung
mm,
difficult nga
mm,
sa amin, paano na
mm,
lang din sa kanila? So
mm,
that's what I am after for. And third is, ito naman ako, pero ibig sabihin na wala din tayong life after or in between. Kasi we will be preparing for second sem, then we will be going back to the development on the first sem subject. So hindi ko alam how would it be, no, sa iba na mayroong family, may anak, at saka kung
mm,
in between sem break lang po ito, parang mahirap i-meet yung aspect na 3 weeks lang.
mm,
So, ganun po, Father. And we are, again, sabi ni Melba, on the ground. So, lahat kami, hindi pa talaga alam mostly paano yung ita-transfer yung traditional to magiging online. So, kulang po, Father, kasi lahat po sa amin ngayon, I am sure, we are doing the DIYs. So, hindi din namin alam kasi we don't have the certain model na ifa-follow namin. Kasi nga, it would always start sa university. So, isa din yun sa hindi namin na alam na structure. So, kaya mostly all of us have different methods to use. Ngayon, basta all we have to do is naibigay namin sa students naman. And with regards to yung learning activities yan po, at saka learning assessment, now we're going to get to know what type of assessment are we going, paano magiging FA, paano magiging SA yun. And another is, sa RLE kasi, Father, is mostly marami kaming formative to come up with a summative. So, yun ang pinaka mahirap or struggle kasi something based sa students. Kahit sabihin natin self-paced din sila at the same time. But there are key areas or may areas doon, gray areas na minsan, hindi na sila naka-follow kung what is exactly the topic that we are going to discuss now. Kasi, yun na nga, walang deadline, walang, we cannot really put a meron talaga kami para matapos na yung lahat, yung mga dapat nilang gawin, and then, we can proceed with the next topic. So, ang nangyari, nag-overlap yung thinking nila, hindi sila makakonsentrate on the next topics to come, which is different naman sa like sa ngayon, CHN na naman kami. So, tawag nito, maternal concepts in CHN. Pero yun lang, Father po, ang dami kasing kailangan i-plan siya muna sa ground bago po yung mag-set my point, Father. Thank you so much.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Grace, for expressing that. No, again, parang let me clarify. No, that's why parang we're having this with per school, because yun nga parang we haven't really set forth a timeline, di ba? Din Pat, parang as I mentioned, parang this is something that has to be discussed within the schools, no? Because parang when we're talking university-wide, our priority talaga first is the GE courses, no? Now, as I mentioned, if there are professional courses that can be identified as something that could initiate, that could start the courseware development process, then that's something that we will be, at least at this point, giving support to. And much of that really is a decision that will have to be made within the schools, diba? Yun naman yung ating understanding doon, no? I think parang it's a misconception na parang we're really having it second sem, no? Parang that's not really, in other words, parang that you only have 3 weeks in order to do that. I don't think that's accurate, no? We're saying that's why at this point parang we're discussing parang how could we go about this, what are the timelines that we could think of, at least taking into account parang what is peculiar to the School of Nursing, what courses could be, at least at this point, could already begin that process, and so on and so forth, no? Din pa parang
Yes.
tama pa po ba yung aking sinabi na ano?
Yes, Father. Initially, when we were introduced to this program, the Courseware Development Program, it was actually mentioned in passing that this will happen in second semester, or we can prepare for second sem. In fact, it has been mentioned that why not start as early as that time, no? But then that did not materialize, and it was clear to everyone after you have mentioned it, and after, I think, Ma'am Gina, after she was actually she started the introduction, no? And then we went to the orientation. The orientation also mentioned during your time, you clearly mentioned that we can just make use of some identified courses to start with, so that we can, because it came from the suggestions of the deans actually, na why not at the same time with the GE courses, mag-start na rin yung pag-develop ng professional courses. At least, we can have a sample. We can look at one or several subjects to start with, so that we can, through the process, be able to identify at what point do we need more inputs, something like that. And it was even mentioned that on top of the webinars that we will be conducting, there will be a back-to-back naman webinar to add to the substance, di ba, Father? In terms of the instructional requirements, so that we can add meat to the courseware that we would like to develop. But
Mm.
it has been cleared, Father, that we are
Mm.
not going to finish all of this second semester and make use
Oh
of
no.
this
No.
them.
Oo.
Uh, hindi man talaga po pwede kasi
Oo. That's
masyadong
right.
maraming kailangan preparation. Kaya
Mm.
nga, this cannot happen overnight. And that has also been mentioned na let's give allowance no for each other to at least man lang be able to digest
Mm.
kung ano man yung kung ano yung
Mm.
dapat maumpisa na maintindihan. Kung
Mm.
kailangan na magdahan-dahan talaga para lang
Mm.
magkaintindihan along that
Mm.
line bago kami
Mm.
mag-umpisa. Parang
Mm.
ganun, Father. And then,
Yeah.
along the way, identify namin yung mga kailangan namin itanong o kaya i-tweak sa nursing kasi nga nursing is something different from the other programs. Yung mga ganun, especially with regard to the content.
Yeah.
Yun naman
Yeah.
yun, Father.
Tama po. That's why parang in other words parang this I'm just introducing the process now, no? And the other parang so that we could start thinking about it. Parang the online courses are available there sa Moodle, so we could start learning about it. But as I have mentioned before, parang I will be waiting in terms of parang how the school will decide in terms of how it will plan its concretely its own courseware development project timeline. No? Because we're really taking into account parang all the things that has been raised right now, no? Both in terms of parang our own teaching load, parang the many things that we're doing. So kaya nga parang we're having this conversation right now. I'm not here to run everyone to the ground. I'm here to actually just introduce it and then let's discuss parang what are the concerns that arise, no? Pero what I want is that we move forward, no? Let's not hold back, parang let's just move forward, parang wherever this will lead us, parang this whole dialogue that happens here, no? So that parang we can surface siguro and later on as we go deeper into the process, then we will see parang the peculiar things that need to be taken into account, especially when designing courseware for nursing subjects. Kasi very different, no? I do recognize that, no? Parang I mean, clear naman yun, no? Parang very different ang bawat discipline. Kaya nga we're not coming with a one size fits all solution. We're not moving into the details of how it should be taught because that's something that you as subject matter experts would know very well. Parang what we are here is to help you translate that into something building a course online. Diba? Now, ang problema dito, parang who else can help us out in terms of that? There's the CS people. They can talk about the technical aspects, no? But even the others who sort of know the theory behind it, so parang can they build the course on Moodle? Do they know how to operate all the features of Moodle? No? Uh, so parang there are all of us parang have certain limitations. That's why we're trying to bring everyone together so that we could, parang build on each other's strengths, no? So that we could accomplish parang what we would want to do. Because again, this is for our students. This is for uh, the university's sake din, no? That we can survive parang even if parang this pandemic is making it difficult for us to teach the things that we used to teach well in a face-to-face setup. So I think parang that's really where we are coming from, no? And that's why we're continuing this process of introducing these ideas and leading you to what else we could do so that we could already plan ahead and start discussing these things.
Actually, Father Oji,
What? Yes, din Pat, go ahead.
the three courses that we have identified as as our sample for the nursing program, we already gave it to the clinical instructors for them to also give comments if in case they have other suggestions, no? They are welcome, no, to give their comments and suggestions with regard to the courses that we would like to consider as the first batch of professional courses for course development.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Okay, yeah.
Father.
In other words, parang that's good that we're subjecting it to that, no? Parang getting people's feedback in terms of how it can. Pero ang akin dito parang yun nga, parang let's find solutions. Let's find solutions in terms of how we could do it. And I'm sure we could really accomplish it when we do it that way. And yun, parang I guess I appreciate that we have all this, we're getting all this feedback from people, you know? But yun, parang let's keep on moving forward with it. Sige po. As I mentioned, parang you might want to take a look at the 3 courses that I have built up in Moodle. So there's the thing, parang if you want to learn about writing learning outcomes, there's that course. So it's the same password, Magis, same enrollment key. If you want to learn about creating effective learning assessments, that's there. If you want to learn about instructional design models and concepts pertaining to instructional design, it's there. It's how to conduct analysis, parang needs analysis. It's there. It's in the 3 courses muna. The others I have not yet made available because I'm still building it. No? So as I've said, parang I'm just making fair use of content that is available through a paid service because that would be expensive kung if all of us subscribe to it. Ilang dollars din yun per course. Okay, there's wala na ako from my own end. Perhaps as people take up this, you can look at the templates, the toolkits, you can look at these training courses, and then siguro next we could address pa other concrete concerns in terms of building the course. Kasi ang crucial taga dito yung as we've been mentioning, parang the design of the course, no? How it could be taught more effectively, and then looking at ways in terms of could that be translated really in an online setup given the technology that we have. Kasi it could be so elaborate pero hindi pala pwede i-convert online, no? Then parang it will fall flat. But we'll try to look for ways of implementing something, especially given what we have right now parang as part of our online instructional technologies. Sige po. Dean Pat, yun lang po yung aking kon ngayon. Thank you for Melba and Grace, thank you for expressing your thoughts on this. No? We'll see what we can do in terms of some of the questions that you raised, and hopefully parang
Thank you,
I've clarified
Father.
some of the things as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Okay, salamat po.
Yeah. Opo,
Father.
salamat.
Sige po, ingat po tayo lahat. Hindi tayo kumpiyansa.
Thank you, Father.
Ay, oo.
Sige
Yes,
po.
Father. Di pa ako lumalabas. Sige po.
Ingat-ingat lang po. Sige po.
Rest assured na lang, Father, na we will be getting feedback from our clinical instructors because we certainly will be needing all of them also.
Yes po. Sige. Sige, Dean Pat. Yeah. As I've said, parang the links that I've shared with you, parang you can take a look at it. And then the course for training is available online as well. Sige, Roy, send ko na lang, i-upload ko na lang to sa YouTube and then I'll send the link to you to everyone.
Thank you, Father.
Father,
Thank you,
Salamat
Father.
po.
Thank you.
Thank you po. Thank you
Thank
for
you
your
so
time.
much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you po. Salamat
So,
po.
our next webinar will be next Monday, Father.
Sige
Wala
po,
na.
pwede. Teka po. I'll check muna yung
Sige po.
sorry.
Father,
Yung next po is meron pala ako Monday kasi with SOE next Monday. Kuha na lang din Pat, kunyari if there are questions that arise, maybe it would be good to direct people muna to the online self-paced online courses that I've put up so that parang if there are questions that arise from it, then we could deal with that siguro in a forum.
Sige,
Maybe ang vacant ko po is so far Monday next week I already have a schedule, then Wednesday. Yung Tuesday would be vacant time for me, sorry.
Okay ba yun, Doc Liz and Mang? Will Tuesday be...
Okay lang din siya, ma'am.
okay lang ako Tuesday, ma'am. Same
3
time po
o'clock
ba?
Ang
no?
problema lang man for today, ma'am, yung internet connection lang naman.
Opo.
But I think okay lang naman.
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday naman pwede ng 3 o'clock, no?
Opo.
Yes, ma'am.
Sige, gano'n na lang, Father. I-ano muna namin, i-iron out yung mga na-discuss natin.
Sige po. Sige po.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you po. Thank you po.
Thank you, Father.
Roy, thank you very much.
Yes.
Tingnan mo na lang, Roy, ha? Nandun na lahat.
Yes, Father.
For
Sige,
everyone
po.
else. Thank
Sige
you
po.
po. Salamat.